Look at this grandmother. Did the nursing home forget to pick you up? The young cadet's laughter echoed through the military base dressing room as he mocked the 65-year-old woman struggling with her gear. His smirk widened as she remained silent, her weather hands moving with peculiar precision across her equipment. He had no idea that the old woman he was humiliating was Commander Vance, a decorated Navy SEAL with over 4,000 combat hours, holder of the Navy Cross, and a living legend in special operations. Tomorrow morning, when he stood trembling on the training ground, he would learn the most brutal lesson of his military career. Never judge a warrior by their age. In the darkness of a submerged helicopter simulator, as panic consumed his unit and death reached up from the black water below, this grandmother would become their only hope for survival. The hunter had just mocked the apex predator. The fluorescent lights of the military base dressing room cast harsh shadows across the rows of metal lockers. The air was thick with the smell of industrial detergent and nervous sweat. It was 1900 hours on a Tuesday evening, and the facility was preparing for the most demanding training cycle of the year, the Advanced Aquatic Warfare Qualification. I end the corner of the dressing room. A woman moved slowly, her 65-year-old frame appearing frail against the backdrop of young, muscular cadets. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and deep lines etched her face, the kind that come from decades of squinting into hostile suns and violent winds. Her hands, gnarled and scarred, fumbled slightly with the buckles of her training harness. Cadet Leader Ror, a 24-year-old tower of arrogance built on a foundation of legacy of missions and minimal real-world experience, noticed her immediately. To him, she was an anomaly, an error in the system. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "Look at this grandmother," he announced loudly, his voice cutting through the murmur of preparation. "Did the nursing home forget to pick you up?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the room. Several younger cadets, eager to curry favor with their leader, joined in the mockery. "Seriously," Roar continued, stepping closer to her, his shadow falling across her weathered face. "Ma'am, I think you're in the wrong building. The bingo hall is across base. This is a combat training facility. We're preparing for scenarios that would break men half your age." The woman didn't respond. She didn't even look up. Her focus remained fixed on her harness, her fingers, those peculiar, scarred fingers, moving with a slow, deliberate precision that seemed almost mechanical. She tested each buckle, each strap, with a thoroughness that bordered on obsessive. Another cadet, emboldened by Roar's performance, chimed in. "Should we call base medical?" She might have wandered off from the retiree center. More laughter, louder this time. Roar was on a roll now, playing to his audience. He circled her like a predator, his voice dripping with theatrical condescension. "No, wait. I get it. This must be some kind of diversity initiative. No age left behind, right? Next week they'll probably send us someone in a wheelchair just to prove a point." He grabbed a clipboard from a nearby bench, making a show of examining it. "Let's see, observer from the Veterans Liaison Program." He looked up, his eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "An observer? Perfect. So you're just here to watch. Good. Very good. Because if you try to actually participate in tomorrow's training, we'd be spending the whole day fishing you out of the pool and performing CPR on someone who should be knitting sweaters, not wearing tactical gear." The woman's hands never stopped moving. She had moved on from her harness to her rebreather unit, a complex piece of emergency equipment that most cadets struggle with even after weeks of training. Her touch was not one of learning, but of verification. Her thumbs found pressure valves by instinct. Her index fingers tested seal integrity with a practiced, rolling motion that spoke of muscle memory decades in the making. But Roar didn't see this. He saw only what he wanted to see, an old woman, out of place, vulnerable to his mockery. "Tell me, Grandma," he said, leaning in close enough that she could smell the protein shake on his breath. "When was the last time you were in a pool? Senior water aerobics? Maybe some gentle floating to help with your arthritis?" This drew the biggest laugh yet. Even some of the more hesitant cadets were chuckling now, the cruel permission granted by leadership allowing their own insecurities to manifest as mockery. The woman finally looked up. Her eyes met Roar's for just a brief moment. They were gray, the color of storm clouds over deep water, and they held something in them that made Roar's smile falter for just a fraction of a second. But he pushed through it, mistaking that moment of unease for his own temporary weakness. "Anyway," he said, turning back to his audience with a dismissive wave, "welcome to our facility. Try not to break a hip. Tomorrow morning, 0600 sharp, we'll be at the Aquatic Warfare Center. You can sit in the observation booth with the other civilians and watch how real warriors train. Maybe take some notes for your memoir. My day pretending to be relevant in the modern military." The cadets dispersed to finish their preparations, their laughter echoing off the tile walls. Roar gave the old woman one last contemptuous look before strutting toward the exit, his chest puffed with the false authority of a man who had never been truly tested. The woman stood alone in the empty corner of the dressing room. She took a slow, measured breath, the kind that comes from decades of controlling fear and adrenaline in situations where one unsteady breath could mean death. She returned to her equipment check, her movements unchanged, unbothered, as constant as a tide. If Roar had possessed even a fraction of genuine tactical awareness, he would have noticed several things about this grandmother that didn't add up. He would have seen that her gear wasn't issued by the liaison program. It was personal equipment, worn from extensive use. He would have noticed the way she moved, how even her slow, age-stiffened gait maintained perfect balance. Weight always distributed, never off-center. He would have seen the scars, the puckered tissue on her forearm from shrapnel, the distinctive knife scar on her left hand, the marks of a life lived in violent places. But Roar had never been taught to truly observe. He had been taught to assume. That night, the woman sat alone in her assigned quarters, a sparse room in the visiting personnel wing. She reviewed the next day's training protocol on her tablet, her reading glasses perched on her nose. The document detailed the Advanced Helicopter Egress Training, the infamous Dunker exercise that had washed out countless candidates over the years. On her nightstand sat a photograph in a simple frame, a much younger version of herself, face camouflaged, standing with a team of operators in some anonymous desert landscape. The photo bore no names, no dates, no locations. It was a ghost image of ghost warriors. Commander Sarah Vance, United States Navy, retired from active field operations but still on active duty in a specialized evaluation capacity, set her tablet aside. She was 65 years old. She had served for 43 years. She held the Navy Cross with 2 gold stars. She had more combat deployments than Roar had years of life. Tomorrow, she would teach a lesson that no classroom could provide. The Aquatic Warfare Center stood like a steel cathedral at the edge of the base, its massive doors opening into a cavernous space dominated by an Olympic-sized pool. But this was no swimming facility. This was a place of controlled terror, where the margin between life and death was measured in seconds and inches. AT-0600 hours. The cadets assembled on the deck, their nervous energy palpable. The humidity was oppressive, and the sharp chemical bite of chlorine hung in the air like a warning. Above the pool hung the Leviathan, a massive, rusted helicopter fuselage suspended by industrial cables, its shadow falling across the dark water like a mechanical beast waiting to devour them. Cadet Leader Ror stood at the front of the formation, his chest out, his voice commanding. "Listen up. Today we face the ultimate test of mental fortitude and physical skill. The Leviathan doesn't care about your academy grades or your family connections. It only cares about whether you can keep your head when you're upside down, in the dark, with water filling your lungs. This is where boys become—" He stopped mid-sentence. Walking across the deck, moving with that same slow, measured pace from the night before, was the old woman. But she wasn't headed for the observation booth. She was walking directly toward the equipment staging area, where the cadets would gear up for the exercise. Roar's eyes widened. "You've got to be kidding me." She wore the same training uniform as the cadets, though it hung loosely on her lean frame. Her gray hair was pulled back in the same severe bun. She moved to an empty spot on the deck and began her equipment check with that same methodical precision. Roar approached her, his voice dripping with barely controlled frustration. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. This is an active training exercise. Participants only. The observation booth is—" "I'm aware where the observation booth is," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, measured, with a slight rasp that spoke of years of shouting over helicopter rotors and gunfire. "I'm here to participate." A stunned silence fell over the assembled cadets that Roar's face flushed red. With all due respect, ma'am, this exercise is physically demanding and extremely dangerous. We've had cadets half your age wash out or get injured. I can't in good conscience allow a civilian observer to— Your conscience, she interrupted, her gray eyes lifting to meet his, is noted. Before Roar could respond, a voice crackled over the facility's PA system. It was deep, commanding, and belonged to Admiral Thorne, the highest-ranking officer of the Academy, who was observing from the control booth above. Cadet Leader Ror. Yes, sir. Roar snapped to attention. The participant roster has been approved at the command level. Proceed with the exercise. Roar's jaw tightened. Sir, I must protest on safety grounds. Your protest is noted and denied. Proceed. The finality in the Admiral's tone left no room for argument. Roar turned back to his cadets, his humiliation morphing into anger. Fine. Gear up, and someone keep an eye on Grandma here. When she panics and freezes up, I don't want to become a hazard to the rest of the team. The cadets moved to their equipment stations, stealing glances at the old woman. Some looked uncomfortable, others amused, all confused. This was unprecedented. In the control booth, Admiral Thorne stood with his arms crossed, his weathered face unreadable. Beside him, a young lieutenant shifted nervously. Sir, the lieutenant ventured carefully. The cadet leader has a point. If she's injured during this exercise, there will be questions. The Admiral's eyes never left the deck below. Lieutenant, pull up the unredacted service record for our observer. Authorization, Thorne Omega-7. The lieutenant's fingers flew across the keyboard. The file that appeared on the screen made him audibly gasp. Sir, this is— Yes, Thorne said quietly. Now you understand. This won't be a rescue operation, Lieutenant. This will be an education. The Leviathan was lowered into the water with a mechanical groan that sounded like the death cry of some ancient beast. The cadets filed in, their training harnesses clicking as they strapped themselves into the mock helicopter seats. The interior was claustrophobic. Bare metal walls, tiny windows, and the pervasive smell of rust and fear. Commander Vance took a seat in the rear, near the primary emergency exit. Around her, the younger cadets shifted nervously. Roar, in the command seat at the front, called out final checks. Sound off. One by one, the cadets responded, their voices tight with anticipation. When it came to Vance's turn, she simply said, 6 ready. Roar sneered. Try to keep up, Grandma. And for God's sake, don't panic when. The simulator lurched. The windows dipped below the waterline, and the world outside turned into murky, distorted green. The interior lights flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging them into absolute darkness. This was a first test. Sensory deprivation. Then came the rotation. With a violent, bone-jarring lurch, the simulator flipped upside down, just as a real helicopter crash would. The cadets' bodies strained against their harnesses as gravity became their enemy. Then the water began to pour in, cold, shocking, relentless. It came through design breaches in the fuselage, icy fingers of death reaching for them in the dark. The disciplined silence shattered almost immediately. I can't see. Where's the exit? My harness is stuck. Roar's voice, which had been so confident on the deck, now carried a thread of panic. Sound off. Remember your training. Find your reference points. But panic is a virus, and in the dark, it spreads faster than water. Then the scenario went catastrophically wrong. A critical gear in a rotation mechanism, stress from years of use, suddenly sheared off with a scream of tortured metal. Instead of settling into planned stable position, the Leviathan jolted violently and began to sink far faster than safety protocols allowed. The impact sent cascading failures through the system. The primary emergency exit buckled in its frame, the release mechanism jamming solid. A red emergency light flickered on, powered by a backup battery, casting everything in a hellish crimson glow. They were trapped, sinking, off script. The exit won't open, someone screamed. We're sinking too fast. I can't get my harness off. The water was at their waist now, rising with terrifying speed. A young cadet near the front began to hyperventilate, his breathing coming in ragged, panicked gasps. Ror, disoriented and terrified, started shouting commands that no one could follow. The forward hatch. Somebody get the forward hatch. But the forward hatch was smaller, designed as a backup, nearly impossible to operate in rising water and growing chaos. This was no longer a training exercise. This was survival. In the back of the simulator, Commander Sarah Vance remained perfectly still, a center of gravity in a swirling storm. The water was at her chest now, but her breathing was controlled, measured. She had been here before, not in this pool, but in real crashes, in real war zones, where the water wasn't chlorinated and the consequences weren't theoretical. She took one final control breath, held it, and began to move. What happened next would later be described by survivors as something between a dance and a surgical procedure. Each movement economical, purposeful, and executed with a precision that defied the chaos around her. First, her harness. It was stuck, the buckle jammed from the violent impact. She didn't pull or yank. Instead, she shifted her weight, using the buoyancy of the water to create a fraction of slack, then pressed the release with exactly the right pressure and angle. It clicked open. She was free. The water was at her neck. Then she turned to the jammed primary exit. Her hands, those scarred, 65-year-old hands, ran along the frame in the dying red light. Her fingertips, hypersensitive from decades of working in darkness, found the problem. The frame was bent inward at the top hinge. Brute force would fail. She braced her feet against the opposite wall, creating a perfect kinetic bridge with her body. From a wall mount, she grabbed the small fire extinguisher, not to fight fire, but as a precision tool. 3 strikes. Short, brutal, precise. Not wild swings of panic, but the focused impacts of a master craftsman. Thud, thud, thud. The 3rd strike buckled the hinge outward. The door shifted. It was enough. The emergency light died. Total darkness returned. The water was at their chins. Someone had stopped screaming, either unconscious or worse. It was at this moment that Commander Vance became something else entirely. Not a 65-year-old woman, not a grandmother. She became what she had been for 43 years, an operator. The darkness wasn't her enemy. It was her element. She moved to the submerged cabin like a shark, guided by a perfect mental map of the space and the bodies within it. Her movements were eerily graceful, economical, devoid of all wasted motion. First, the panicking cadet near Ror. He was clawing at his own face, his harness hopelessly tangled. Vance placed one hand firmly on his chest, a calming, immovable pressure. With her other hand, her fingers found his harness release in the darkness as if guided by sonar. But she didn't just press it. She manipulated the buckle, clearing the fouled strap with a single practiced twist. The cadet, suddenly free, shot toward the ceiling. Vance grabbed his ankle, preventing him from injuring himself on wreckage. Next was Ror. He had freed himself but was swimming in the wrong direction, toward the seal front of the cabin. Disoriented and desperate, Vance grabbed the back of his collar and physically spun him 180 degrees, her grip iron despite her age, pointing him toward the exit she had cleared. She gave him a firm shove, no malice, only communication. Then she went back. One by one, in the crushing blackness and rising water, she moved from cadet to cadet. For one whose harness was jammed, she used a small flat pry bar, a tool no cadet was issued, that she produced from a hidden pocket in her uniform. For another who was unconscious, she secured her rebreather into his mouth, forcing life-giving air into his lungs before freeing him. She worked with the chilling calm of a bomb disposal expert, each problem assessed and solved in seconds. In the control booth, the screens had gone black. Communications were dead. "Leviathan is off the grid," the lieutenant shouted. "I've lost all telemetry." Admiral Thorne stood motionless, his eyes locked on the dark water of the pool. Safety divers were preparing to enter, but Thorne held up a hand, stopping them. He had seen enough. He knew what was happening down there. He wasn't watching a training exercise anymore. He was watching a ghost from his past go to work. The first to break the surface was a cadet Vance had saved first. He came up sputtering, coughing, eyes wide with terror. Then Ror, gasping for air, his arrogance replaced by hollow shock. Then another, and another. In less than 90 seconds, all 8 cadets were on the surface, alive. The last to emerge was Commander Vance. She broke the surface not with a desperate gasp, but with a quiet exhale, as if she'd simply been holding her breath for a casual swim. She swam to the edge with economical strokes, hoisted herself out in one smooth motion, and stood on the deck. Water streamed from her uniform. Her gray hair had come loose from its bun, hanging in wet strands around her weathered face. Her expression remained neutral, calm, a placid lake after a storm. The entire facility was wrapped in deafening silence, broken only by the ragged gasps of the rescue cadets. Ror stared at her, his mouth open, his mind unable to process what had just happened. Then Admiral Thorne's voice, amplified by the facility PA system, cut through the stunned silence like a rifle shot. Attention on deck. It was not a request. It was a command that made colonels straighten their spines. The rescue cadets, still shivering and disoriented, stumbled toward the center of the room. Ror moved like a man in a trance, his eyes never leaving Vance. The Admiral descended from the control booth, his face a mask of grim purpose. He didn't walk, he strode, each step echoing with the weight of authority earned over decades. He walked past the sputtering cadets. He walked past Ror as if he were furniture. He stopped directly in front of Commander Vance. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then the Admiral spoke, his voice low, devoid of ceremony, the tone one professional uses with another after a mission. Report. Simulator suffered primary rotational gear failure, Vance stated, her voice flat, technical, utterly calm. Resulted in uncontrolled descent and structural frame warp. Primary exit mechanism was compromised. Multiple trainees experienced equipment fouling and spatial disorientation. No pride, no fear. A simple factual after-action summary. The Admiral nodded slowly. The pride tool you used on Cadet Miller's harness. Standard issue for the liaison program, is it? A flicker of irony touched the old man's lips. No, sir, she replied without evasion. The Admiral turned to his aide, who had followed him down holding a secure tablet. Lieutenant, read the file. Unredacted. Authorization Thorne Omega-7. The young lieutenant's eyes widened. That code was reserved for the highest levels of national security. His fingers trembled as he tapped the screen. The file bloomed to life, its header glowing crimson. Classified. Eyes only. The lieutenant began to read, his voice shaky at first, then growing stronger with each unbelievable line. Vance, Sarah. Commander, United States Navy. Active duty. A collective gasp went through the assembled cadets. Ror visibly flinched. A commander. She outranked every instructor in the facility. Unit. Naval Special Warfare Development Group. The name meant little to the cadets, but to those who knew, it was a thunderclap. DEBGRU, SEAL Team 6. The quiet professionals who officially didn't exist. Combat deployments, 12. Classified locations. Combat hours, over 4,000. Impossible numbers. A lifetime spent in the crucible of real conflict. Specialty qualifications, Master Breacher, Combat Diver, Advanced Egress Specialist, Hostage Rescue Team Lead. The last one hung in the air. She didn't just know how to escape. She was the one they sent when others were trapped. Medals and commendations. The lieutenant's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Navy Cross with 2 gold stars. Silver Star. Bronze Star with Valor Device. Purple Heart 3 awards. He trailed off, unable to continue, staring at the screen in disbelief. The silence was crushing. The cadets stood as if turned to stone, their faces a mixture of shame, awe, and terror. They hadn't just misjudged a fellow trainee. They had insulted a living legend. Ror's face had gone pale, ashen. His entire identity, built on academy prestige and a family name, had been demolished. He was a boy who had been playing soldier in front of a master war. Admiral Thorne let the silence stretch, crushing the arrogance that had filled the room. Then he performed an act no one present had ever witnessed. Slowly, deliberately, the 3-star admiral brought his hand up in a sharp, perfect salute. It was not the perfunctory gesture offered to a junior officer. It was a salute of profound, unequivocal respect, a salute reserved for Medal of Honor recipients, for the fallen, for the very best a nation had to offer. Commander Vance. Thorne's voice was formal, cutting through silence like steel. My apologies. It appears there was a clerical error in your registration. You're not here to observe. You're here to evaluate. He turned his gaze on the assembled cadets, and the warmth he had shown Vance was replaced by Arctic fury. You, he said, eyes locking onto Ror, and all of you had just been given the most important lesson of your careers, and you were too blind and too arrogant to see it. He took a step toward Ror. You looked at a decorated combat officer, an expert in the very discipline you were struggling to learn, and you judged her by her age, by her appearance, by everything except her capability. You saw what you wanted to see, someone you perceived as lesser, to bolster your own fragile ego. His voice dropped to a dangerous growl. You spoke of warrior spirit. Let me tell you what that spirit truly is. It's about competence, not confidence. It's about humility in the face of the mission. It's about understanding that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous. He gestured back toward the dark water and the Leviathan. Today you failed this test, not because the machine broke, but because your character broke first. Commander Vance didn't save you from a faulty machine. She saved you from yourselves. You're dismissed. All of you will report for disciplinary review at 0600. He turned back to Vance, his tone shifting to deep respect. Commander, my office. We have much to discuss about training protocols. Vance gave a short nod. Understood, Admiral. 2 words. They carried more weight than all of Ror's speeches combined. They were the sound of quiet, irrefutable competence. The story didn't just spread, it detonated. It moved through Naval Academy like a shockwave, from the barracks to the mess halls, from plebes to senior instructors. It became instant institutional folklore. The details were embellished with each telling, as myths always are, but the core truth remained immutable. A quiet observer, dismissed and mocked, had turned out to be one of the most decorated operators in modern naval history, and had saved the lives of the very cadets who had insulted her. To pull a Vance became campus vernacular, to remain silent while others boasted, only to reveal superior skill when it mattered most. Instructors began using the incident in ethics classes, projecting Commander Vance's simple portrait next to the hulking Leviathan. Look at this woman, one grizzled captain told his class. She holds more combat decorations than my entire department combined. Yet she walked among you, and none of you saw her. You weren't trained to see her. You were trained to see rank, muscle, swagger. You were looking for warriors, but you don't yet understand what a warrior truly looks like. A warrior looks like her. Ror was not expelled. Admiral Thorne, in shrewd wisdom, decided a humbled Ror was more valuable as a living lesson. He was stripped of his leadership position and assigned to remedial duties. The public humiliation was immense, but the internal reckoning truly changed him. Weeks later, he found Commander Vance observing marksmanship training. Heart pounding, he approached her. Ma'am, his voice was quiet, hoarse. Thank you. You saved my life. And you were right. I was wrong. Vance looked at him, her gaze analytical, not judgmental. She saw genuine remorse, the painful birth of humility. Assumptions are a liability, Ror, she said calmly. In the field, they get people killed. Learn from it. That's all that matters. She turned back to the firing line. For her, the conversation was concluded. For Ror, it was the beginning of his true education. The Academy created a new award, the Vance Medallion, given to cadets who exemplified quiet professional excellence. The simulator was repaired but never called the Leviathan again. The cadets renamed it the Commander's Classroom. Made official by administration, a brass plaque was affixed to the control booth. In this place, a lesson was taught. Competence is quiet. Assumptions are loud. The water remembers. The plaque became a point of pilgrimage. Cadets touching it for luck before training, a silent acknowledgement of the standard they were now held to. A year later, Admiral Thorne watched a new class prepare for training. The atmosphere was different now. The pre-exercise bravado was gone, replaced by quiet, focused intensity. His aide approached. The first group of mentors from the Vance Protocol arrives next week, sir. The Admiral nodded, a faint smile on his face. Excellent. He watched a young woman, smaller than most of the men, meticulously inspect equipment. The senior cadet approached her not with condescension, but genuine curiosity. Is there an issue? No, just verifying. Trust but verify. Good call. That simple, respectful interaction was Vance's legacy in action. The old ways of chest-thumping and arrogant posturing had been exposed as dangerous vulnerability. True strength wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but the most capable mind. The Admiral thought of Vance, wherever she was now, likely moving through some shadow world, unseen and unheard, a silent guardian. Her work wasn't for applause, but for the continuation of something greater than herself. The ultimate weapon is not the rifle in your hands or the rank on your collar, but the unwavering calm in your heart and the practiced skill in your mind. The true warrior doesn't announce their arrival. Their presence is felt in the sudden calm that descends upon chaos, and impossible problems quietly solved. True legacy isn't what you leave behind in stories or statues. It's what continues forward in the actions of others. Never judge capability by appearance, age, or assumptions. True strength is demonstrated through action, not declared through words. The most dangerous warriors are often the quietest, the most underestimated, and the least concerned with proving themselves to others. Competence speaks for itself when it matters most. Respect is not given based on superficial attributes. It is earned through skill, dedication, and the calm mastery of one's craft. The greatest lesson comes not from arrogance, but from humility in the face of those who have walked paths we cannot imagine. Age is not weakness. Silence is not incompetence. And the warrior you dismiss today may be the one who saves your life tomorrow. If you enjoyed this powerful story of quiet competence triumphing over loud arrogance, where true warriors prove their worth through actions rather than words, then subscribe to USX Stories for more tales that challenge assumptions and celebrate the unsung heroes among us. Hit that subscribe button and join a community that values substance over show and competence over confidence. Subscribe to USX Stories, where every story teaches a lesson worth learning.